I was presented with a gift in 1748 that I now regret turning down: arrogance before ruin, and pride before collapse. The statement says as much, yet in my case, my greed brought to my demise. I contracted the plague in 1748, along with my family and other villagers. Like everyone else in my village, I knew I was going to die. At that moment, I was visited by an unfamiliar guy who presented me with a gift. Immortality was a gift no one in my situation could reject. I didn't even listen to him when I accepted his demands, since I was so dazed from the virus. I was greedy and didn't want to die since I felt like I could live forever. He disappeared out of thin air as soon as I accepted his requirements. Although I had nearly believed that the whole event was a hallucination, my quickly becoming better state of health indicated otherwise. I went to visit my family because, well, I was delighted about it. My happiness was short-lived. However, as I soon discovered this gift was a burden, I saw my family members suffer in their last moments as they passed away one by one. I stood there and watched helplessly as they went through agony. I prayed much, but that odd guy never came back. My baby sister was the last member of my family to pass away, and I embraced her as she took her last breath. I spent days in tears and walked the town without eating or drinking. Why was it useful? Besides, what was the point? I couldn't die. Nothing would come of my calls for the odd guy to come take back his gift. The plague survivors didn't take long to begin to doubt me. The witch hunts of years ago had subsided, yet nevertheless they intended to burn me at the stake. This made me decide to travel and leave the town. Before settling down in a tiny town, I went to a number of locations. I made an effort to live a happy life there, and I did manage to find some tranquility. I didn't have to wait long to meet the person who would eventually win my heart. She had the gentleness of the sun and the beauty of a flower. The curse of immortality didn't stop me from succumbing to her allure. We had been dating for a few weeks before we finally got together. I was such an idiot, pushing my immortality to the back of my mind. We got engaged and started planning our wedding a few months after we started dating. I was startled out of the paradise I had carelessly put myself in the night before our wedding. My lover's brother informed me that she had unexpectedly become ill. I hurried to her bedside at their house. While the local physician assessed her deteriorating health, I held her hand. He delivered us the awful news with a sad expression on his face. At her bedside, her relatives and I shed tears. I told her over and over again how much I loved her and how much she meant to me while holding her hand firmly. She said something sweet to me in a scratchy voice before she went by. I didn't know what was causing her sickness, but I knew it was me. I glanced up to see the same weird guy standing on the opposite side of her bed, which reinforced my assumption. I shocked her relatives by staggering backward in horror. I asked him what he wanted from me, belittling him, and soon my disbelief turned to wrath. I didn't care if her family thought I was insane. Before answering, the guy gave me a long look and said, "You should have listened to my terms," as they pulled me out of the room. This extinguished the fire in my heart. I was ordered to get my act together and booted out. They were unable to notice the odd guy. I went through the town and into the woods, once again, wanting more than anything that I could die. I stumbled over a tree root because I lacked the strength to get my feet off the ground. I lost my balance and lay there for many hours. I glanced up to view that guy once again when I heard ominous chuckling. I felt empty, and I didn't even have the energy to shout and yell at him. "Could you please return your gift?" Instead, I inquired. He chuckled, saying that once a gift is given, it cannot be taken back. Prior to accepting, you had to have listened to my requirements. Could you at least tell me what the requirements were, since I cursed myself? That seems harmless to me, so I may as well. There were 3 prerequisites. The first of the 3 gave you an impeccable memory, preventing you from ever forgetting anything. In the event that you sustain a fatal injury to a mortal, you will temporarily pass away and go through 10 times the suffering. The third and last need is that someone you love will pass away. He thought for a long while before answering. I felt my stomach twist and dragged myself up to my knees. Even simply hearing about the conditions made me nauseous. Since I was the one who caused this to happen, I was unable to even feel angry with him. Again, he disappeared into thin air, leaving me on my own. Tears filled my body, and I balled myself up as little as possible. I traveled about a lot after that, never remaining somewhere for very long. I avoided contact with individuals as much as possible out of concern that I would also be responsible for their demise. I carried on in this manner until 1823. I went through the second of the 3 requirements in 1823. I didn't really pay much attention to the town I was wandering through in the woods, although it was nearby. I had barely gotten behind a big tree when a bullet hit me in the neck. My esophagus, broken blood spurted out of my neck. It was too late when I tried to stop the blood by grabbing at my neck. I passed out and kept feeling that anguish 10 times over. It seemed like a personal hell for me, even though I couldn't die. That's when I started to dread dying. When I came to, I couldn't tell how long it had been, but the light was rising again. It was lunchtime, the last I recall before losing consciousness. I could still feel the agony in my neck, so I reached for it right away. I couldn't forget that, but thankfully everything healed up as if nothing had occurred. I can still clearly recall the agony, albeit it wasn't the worst I've ever felt. I was in England in 1940 during the Blitz, or bombardment. I was in the vicinity of the firebombing, in addition to being roasted alive. I also had many fractures from being struck by debris. I felt that ache double every time I went longer than a week without a break. I had night terrors after that, feeling that same agony again and over. Months after the incident, the night terrors persisted because it was so awful. I decided not to sleep. I made the decision to hide from the outside world as a result. In the past, I didn't mind traveling, but technology was developing rapidly. The thought of being suspected weighed heavily on me. I then observed as my surroundings developed to their current state. I still made my rounds, but I made an effort to go as covertly as possible. This did not go as planned, since a certain group became aware of my presence. I was mostly to blame since I overstayed my welcome in a metropolis and attracted unwelcome attention. I won't go into all the specifics of how the group abducted me since it is not required. In any case, the group abducted and abused me 15 years ago. I put up quite a struggle when I was taken, of course, and one of their agents ended up unalive. They took me with them to dispose of my corpse even though I was dead, but a few hours later I awoke. They used me in a number of studies to try to figure out how I was eternal. They tormented me in the name of science, decapitating, poisoning, and electrocuting me. They said that this was being done for the sake of humanity, but I really disputed that. I endured that agony for endless years every time I was rendered unconscious. They used me as a test subject for over 4 years. My body ultimately gave up from all of the torment, which is the only reason I managed to escape. They used a deadly injection to render me unconscious, and because of the continuous agony I endured, it took longer for me to recover and become conscious than they had anticipated, as none of their investigation turned up anything useful. I suppose they opted to throw me out. After my corpse was disposed of, I awoke around a month later. I lived through all the agony I had gone through in that month. After I woke up, I avoided people completely and resisted going to sleep for months. While I was thinking of methods to bring the organization down, I was living in the woods. Fortunately, the authorities closed the group down when it found out they were doing human experimentation. It took me years before I was comfortable going out in public, even though I was relieved not to have to worry about that group. I moved so much because I still quake at the notion of being found again. Even after all these years, 3 new things: a job, a city, and a name. I make an effort to go on with my life, but I can't help but see that guy from the corner of my eye and hear his menacing chuckle reverberate in my mind. I have no idea what or who he is, but I do know that he is not a kind, helpful guy. I know a lot of people who read this will be more sympathetic than afraid of my tale, but that's not why I came here. I regret the choices I made that got me here, but I have come to terms with them. I made a stupid decision, and now I'm paying for it. I'm only posting this to serve as a warning to others. You don't have to believe me, and I don't care. Refuse any present that a strange stranger offers you if you're ever in a desperate circumstance.